Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everyone for joining us today. I'm Shreya Pradhan from Asia Pacific Telecommunity, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's web dialogue on unsolicited commercial message, current policy, regulation trends, and future collaboration in the Asia Pacific region in collaboration with Korea Internet Security Agency. In this web dialogue, we will discuss the policies and regulations related to unsolicited commercial messages, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Mashinari Kondo, Secretary General of Asia-Pacific Telecommunity, for his welcome remarks. Welcome, Mr. Kondo.
Okay, thank you, Julia. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. So welcome to the APT Web Dialogue today. We are organizing this dialogue with Korea Internet and Security Agency, KISA. And I would like to express our appreciation to KISA for its support and collaboration. Especially, I want to thank Mr. Kyung-sik Park, General Researcher, KISA, and all other panelists for joining us despite their busy schedule. APT Web Dialogue, or AWD in short, provides a discussion platform for sharing information, exchanging views and opinions, and learning something new. So it is an intellectual agora of APT. So AWD covers many interesting topics and fields that would stimulate your insights as policymakers, business managers, researchers, innovators, or visionaries. Today's AWD will cover issues of unsolicited commercial messages. This is an interesting topic, and it is important to listen to and share different views and perspectives. We have 5 eminent speakers who are experts in this field, and I'm sure that their presentations and views will shed light on our way moving forward. So again, I thank you all for your participation, and I hope you enjoy today's dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kondo. Now, may I kindly invite Mr. Young Yu Sin, Program Officer of Asia Pacific Telecommunity, for his presentation. Welcome, Mr. Sin.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I am Young Yu Sin, Program Officer of APT. Thank you for having me for today's web dialogue. I'd like to share my screen, my slide. Okay. From now on, I would like to present on the topic unsolicited commercial messages, current policy, regulation trends, and future collaboration in Asia-Pacific region. Actually, my presentation is an introduction of APT in-house research report that APT Secretariat conducted in 2021 in collaboration with KISA. The research report has more than 140 pages, but I will try to deliver the main content of the report as briefly as possible. Start from the background of the research. In order for electronic communication platforms, applications, and services contribute to economic and social development, they must be reliable, efficient, and trustworthy. However, nowadays, email and other electronic communication tools are largely threatened by unsolicited, unwanted, and harmful electronic commercial messages, commonly known as spam. Spam, which began as electronic messages, advertise commercial products or services, has evolved over the past years and become to have negative impact, which can be deceptive, cause network disruptions, and can be used as a stepping stone for spreading viruses and other malware. So the harm of spam is it can be invasion of personal privacy and can be a nuisance, and it causes vulnerability to fraud, harassment, and misinformation. So globally, there are several researches on unsolicited commercial messages, such as the one recently conducted by ITU and others by public or private organizations. Also, there are international collaboration initiatives to mitigate the harm caused by spam. However, in Asia Pacific region, it is difficult to find relevant and updated information on the current status of APT members regarding spam. Under such circumstances, the 44th and 45th session of the Management Committee of the APT approved to conduct a research on collaborative response measures to prevent unsolicited commercial messages in Asia Pacific region. So in 2021, a research team conducted a survey on current status of spam policy, regulation, and international cooperation of APT members. Also, we studied global trends and international cooperation activities. There are some lessons from developed countries. First, registration and regulation underpins government management of the sending of spam. And second, effective enforcement of the registration and regulation exists. And third, active non-registrative activities such as preventive technical measures to reduce the amount of spam reaching consumer and public and industry education activities have been conducted by the government. To study the regulation and policy of the developed countries, we mainly analyzed these 5 countries or country union, USA, Canada, France, Germany, and EU. Also, there have been international cooperation activities to mitigate the impact of spam since 2001. Convention on Cybercrime 2001, also known as the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, regulates the offenses against the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of computer data and systems. EU e-Privacy Directive 2002 included some provisions related to spam. And London Action Plan 2004 started the discussion on international spam enforcement cooperation among government and public agencies from 27 countries. And Anti-Spam Toolkit 2006 was introduced by OECD, which includes a package of recommended policies and measures addressing regulatory approaches, enforcement cooperation, industry-driven activities, technical solutions, education and awareness initiatives, etc. And members of London Action Plan changed their name to Unsolicited Communications Enforcement Network, UCENet, in 2016, and it has 28 government members and 27 industry participants. From 2018 to 2020, ITUD study group conducted a research on spam and produced a report in 2020, which includes problem analysis, solutions, and best practices. From 2009, WTO started e-commerce negotiations on trade-related aspects of electronic commerce and have dealt with unsolicited commercial messages issues. And regional comprehensive economic partnership (RCEP) agreement signed in 2020 also includes some provisions regarding spam, and 15 countries from Asia Pacific region signed it. Then our research team studied and analyzed 17 APT members' current status related to spam. Those members are Australia, Bhutan, Brunei Darussalam, People's Republic of China, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Japan, Kiribati, Republic of Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, New Zealand, Philippines, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Vietnam. Some of them had completed survey questionnaires that APT Secretariat sent to them. And for some of them, we found a lot of information from their website and their laws and decrees. There are the aspects we focused on during the research. We categorized three main aspects: registration, policy, and international cooperation. Under the registration and regulation, we try to figure out whether members have comprehensive registration or don't have any concrete registration, or just have a simple standalone provision in some other laws. Also, we checked whether they adopted opt-in framework or opt-out framework for spam regulation. As you may know, opt-in means senders need to get the recipient's prior consent before they send emails or SMS, and opt-out means senders don't need to get prior consent from the recipients. The recipients can refuse to receive more emails, SMS from senders after receiving first email or SMS. We also checked whether members mandate senders to provide accurate sender information, and whether members mandate to include the unsubscribe facility for opting out, and whether impose advertisement email SMS senders the labeling obligation, which means senders indicate that the sent email and SMS is an advertisement in the subject line. Under the policy sector, we try to figure out what kind of technical measures members do apply, and also whether members adopt any self-regulation schemes by industry, and what kind of education, awareness raising activities members are doing. Also, we try to find what kind of international cooperation activities members are participating in. The results are as follows. Only 8 of the 17 countries have comprehensive legal systems. 6 members adopt opt-in framework: Australia, Korea, Japan, China, New Zealand, Vietnam. And 2 members adopt opt-out framework: Singapore and Hong Kong. Regarding the regulation on spam email, 8 of the 17 countries studied last year: Australia, Korea, Japan, Singapore, China, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Vietnam have a comprehensive spam legislation. In case of Thailand and Bhutan, unlike the above countries, there is no comprehensive legal system for spam email. Instead, other laws regulate spam emails. Thailand has an opt-in system by the Computer Crimes Act. And in case of Bhutan, an opt-out system for spam email regulation was created in the Information and Communication Media Act. You can find the details of each country's regulation in the table. And mostly members that have legislation on spam mandate to provide the sender information and provide unsubscribe facility, and mandate labeling, and prohibit address harvesting software, which searches online sources automatically to obtain email addresses from public data. And typically, these addresses are used for bulk email and spam. You can see other countries' cases here in the table. And then the regulations on spam email and spam SMS or MMS are regulated by the same laws in most countries and have the same tendency. However, in some countries, different laws apply to spam emails and spam messages. Regarding the regulation on spam messages, 8 of the 17 countries studied last year: Australia, Korea, Japan, Singapore, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Philippines, and Vietnam have a comprehensive system of registration on spam messages. These countries have adopted an opt-in: Australia, Korea, Japan, New Zealand, Philippines, and Vietnam, or opt-out framework like such as Singapore and Hong Kong. You can find the details of each country's regulation in the table. Mostly members have registration on spam SMS or MMS mandate to provide the sender information and provide unsubscribe facility and mandate labeling. You can see some other cases, country case here in this page. And regarding the spam policy, as I said before, we focus on technical measures and self-regulation by industry and education and awareness raising activities. In terms of technical measures, in many countries, technical filtering measures by private internet service providers were the most important technical measures related to spam response. Australia, Korea, Thailand, Brunei, and Micronesia, Sri Lanka explicitly mentioned technical measures by telecommunication service providers. And Republic of Korea is taking government-driven technical measures. In Korea, the Information and Communications Network Act stipulates that the government can develop and distribute software to block spam. Accordingly, KISA actually prepared KISA RBL, real-time blocking list, and KISA MRBL, mobile real-time blocking list, and white domain, it's kind of a white list, and provide them to service providers. In terms of self-regulation, Korea, New Zealand, Hong Kong, Thailand, and Singapore have self-regulation systems. Republic of Korea issues a spam distribution status report half yearly and regularly announces the amount of spam distribution by each service provider. Singapore, New Zealand, Thailand, and Hong Kong promote voluntary spam reduction efforts of service providers by creating and using private business associations code of practice. Singapore has also developed spam control guidelines with ISPs. In terms of education and awareness raising activities, Australia, Korea, China, Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Brunei, and Sri Lanka are conducting business and user education and awareness raising activities at the government level. So Australia and Korea provides education to industry stakeholders and users. China and Malaysia are engaged in education and awareness raising activities. And Hong Kong is operating education and publicity programs such as public seminars and exhibitions. And the Brunei government provides online safety learning materials, awareness talks, and also publishes videos, audios, and awareness materials for broadcasting in its online safety awareness program. And Sri Lanka conducts education and awareness raising through social media and sends SMS to subscribers by service providers. Lastly, regarding the international cooperation, Australia, Korea, Japan, China, Malaysia, and Hong Kong have been participating in UCENet, which started as the London Action Plan and continued more than 15 years. And in particular, Republic of Korea has strengthened cooperation within the region by establishing UCENet Asia Pacific, which is a regional initiative of UCENet. And recently, a number of members, Australia, Korea, Japan, Singapore, China, Malaysia, New Zealand, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, and Brunei have signed the RCEP agreement. We briefly reviewed the current status of spam regulation and policies in our region. However, we don't have the overall picture of the whole Asia Pacific region yet. So APT Secretariat will continue our journey to figure out the holistic picture. And the ultimate goal of this research project is to find common elements and consider possible measures to mitigate the impact of the issue unsolicited commercial messages in Asia Pacific region. To the end, in 2022 and 2023, our research team plans to conduct additional fact-finding surveys on the remaining members that did not submit survey results in 2021, and analysis of problems, limitations of current international cooperation measures based on the results of the survey and desk study, and also conduct research to find common elements and consider possible measures to mitigate the impact of spam in the Asia Pacific region. Also, APT Secretariat plans to help members through various capacity building activities, such as training course and expert missions. We have planned to develop training courses in collaboration with KISA to provide the relevant information on global trends, registration, and policy in the field of STEM, which will be available to APT members in 2023. In addition, we can also provide consulting service on STEM control legislation, policies, and international cooperation measures in collaboration with KISA when there is a request from APT members. This is the end of my presentation. I believe it can be a starting point of today's discussion, and I hope today's web dialogue can also be a good opportunity to have to hear many good ideas on our research. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, for providing such informative presentation. Next, I'd like to invite Dr. Jongbong Park, Director of Project Development at Asia Pacific Telecommunity. Welcome, Dr. Park.
Thank you, Surya, and good day to you all. My name is Jongbong. As a director, I'm looking after the APT work program. Today, I have an honor to moderate this meaningful APT web dialogue on unsolicited commercial messages, focusing on current policy, regulation trends, and future collaboration in the region. Spam was started as a commercial messages, but as Mr. Sin already told the web dialogue, it has evolved over the recent years with the same speed of technology development, or even faster. These days, it runs not only for the advertisement purposes, but also causes lots of social and economic impact, including fraud and breaches of personal data. Spam could be easily overlooked as a small and tiny side effect of ICT development in many cases. However, the bandwidth and traffic taken by the spam would be a major international traffic for some of the countries in the world. For some of the developed countries, the traffic caused by spam could be marginal. However, some of other countries, especially the landlocked developing countries and small island developing states, whose traffic taken by the spam would be significant portion in their international traffic and harmful for the connecting people through the extended connectivity to unserved and underserved population. So in this context, it is timely for APT to conduct the relevant studies together with KISA and to organize this APT web dialogue to share the information and exchange views and best practices. The presentation made by Mr. Sin was quite useful to understand the current situation in the Asia-Pacific region, especially as the background of the studies that spam makes vulnerable for fraud. So spam and scam have linked together. So during the today's dialogue, we'll be discussing both spam and scam together. In this regard, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Sin, for setting the scene and then making all participants at the same page. The data shows that only 8 out of 17 countries have been the legal system to address the spam, and this provides a snapshot. Many APT members are not ready to properly address this challenge. Having said this, I'm privileged to introduce our eminent panelists to you with the hope that our panel discussion would be beneficial to all participants. Let me introduce 4 panelists today. Mr. Francis Chang, Deputy Director from Singapore. Mr. Kyung-sik Park, General Researcher of KISA, Republic of Korea. Ms. Kathleen Shirley, Assistant Secretary, Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Communication, Australia. Last but not the least, Ms. Susan Park, a Senior Foreign Attorney, Bay Kim and Lee LCC. Welcome you all once again. For the panel discussion today, I'd like to ask all the panelists to make a short introductory remarks by using a presentation or just a verbal note to outline the status of the SPAM in the respective country and their responses as well within 7 to 10 minutes. After concluding the full presentation or talks, we will open for the floor for question or answers. And then if you have any question to Mr. Sin, feel free to make a question during the Q&A session. Or we will monitor the chat box during the presentation or speeches. So feel free to make any question or comments during the discussion. Without further ado, I'd like to proceed to invite our panel to say a few words. The first speaker, the panelist, Mr. Francis Zhang. He's the Deputy Director at the Personal Data Protection Commission of Singapore, and he's also a member of the Singapore Legal Service. He's experienced in a wide range of legal and regulatory issues, having been a prosecutor and legal advisor at the Attorney General's Chambers of Singapore and a legal advisor at the Ministry of Education of Singapore. At the PDPC, Francis leads the policy team, which drives the policies under the Personal Data Protection Act 2012, as well as the Spam Control Act in 2007. With this being said, I'd like to hand over the microphone to Francis. Over to you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Park. And thank you, Mr. Sin, for the presentation earlier. I'll be briefly going through the anti-spam measures and the anti-scam measures from the Singapore's perspective. So my sharing will be divided into 3 parts: anti-spam, anti-scam, and the final part will be on international collaboration, which, as Mr. Sin pointed out, is very important. Right, in Singapore, we have 2 laws that protect consumers from spam. One is the Spam Control Act, and the other is the Personal Data Protection Act. So technically, the Spam Control Act only covers unsolicited commercial electronic messages sent in bulk, which is the traditional definition of spam. So we require spammers to take certain measures, such as using a mark, ADV, to mark their messages as spam, and also to provide an unsubscribe option. And also, as Mr. Sin mentioned earlier, we also require accurate sender information, as well as to prohibit dictionary and address harvesting techniques. The other law is the Personal Data Protection Act, which covers more than just unsolicited messages sent in bulk. It actually covers telemarketing messages via phone call, SMS, or fax to Singapore telephone numbers. And what we do is we set up a registry called the Do Not Call Registry to let consumers opt out of receiving such telemarketing messages. Let me show you 2 posters that we have. So the one on the left is more on the Spam Control Act. And you can see under the green tick, we not only use the Spam Control Act requirements to protect consumers, we also use it in a way to help them identify what are safe messages. So if the spammers take effort to actually insert a mark, an ADV mark, provide unsubscribe option, it is more likely that those messages are legitimate. But of course, the consumers also have to check for suspicious links and verify the source. The poster on the right is for the Do Not Call registry. So the orange box tells you what happens after you opt out. Once you register with the DNC registry, within 21 days, organizations have to stop sending you unsolicited telemarketing messages, unless you have an existing service relationship with them or you have given them consent. But even then, you can always tell them to stop sending you at any time. Okay, so that is for anti-spam. For anti-scam, we actually do have some technical measures, though not really publicized. So there are two categories. One is targeted at SMSs and one targeted at phone calls. For the SMSs, we work with the, okay, sorry, let me just to clarify that when I say we, I'm referring to the Infocom Media Authority of Singapore, which is a bit different from where I'm in, the Personal Data Protection Commission, but we are really part of the same organization handling this. So we work with the telcos, the telecommunications companies, to block suspicious SMSs, as well as the malicious links within the SMSs. And we also have this registry called the SMS Sender ID Registry. So Sender ID means a name that businesses can use that will appear when you receive a text. So when you receive an SMS from a business, the identity of the sender is not a phone number, but a name. So in Singapore, we have a Sender ID registry. Right until now, it is voluntary. So businesses can register if they want to, so that consumers know when they receive a message, they can check against the registry to see whether this is a business that has been registered. But it doesn't really prevent scam, because scammers can use unregistered sender IDs to spoof such sender IDs. And these unregistered sender IDs are also used by legitimate businesses, just that they have not registered. So going forward, we are actually planning to make it compulsory. So mandatory sender ID registration. If you are a business and you want to rely on sender IDs to send out SMSs, you have to register, so that we can block all non-registered sender IDs by default. And that would give consumers more protection. And then at the bottom, that is just something that we are exploring to identify how to filter scam SMSs above and beyond what we have been doing to block known malicious SMSs and links. So those are for the and targeted at SMSs. For calls, we also work with telcos to block known or specific spoof call numbers, and we insert a plus prefix for overseas calls so that consumers know when they are receiving calls overseas, and to be vigilant. If they are not expecting a call from the overseas, maybe they can choose not to even pick up the call. We also use pattern recognition technology to block robocalls. And at the bottom, we are exploring blocking spoof Singapore numbers. Okay, let me just mention this. This Scam Shield is a mobile app developed by one of Singapore's government agencies. It's available to the public to download. Once you download the app, it will instruct you on how to adjust certain settings in your phone, and you can block scam callers, you can filter scam SMSs, and you can even report scam calls and scam SMSs. And the reporting function actually helps to build in to the database and better protect consumers going forward. Okay, finally, let me touch on international collaboration. As Mr. Sin mentioned, this is very important because spammers and scammers do not respect geographical boundaries. So we need a global effort to combat this. And as a starting point, I think that countries can work together on certain issues such as information sharing, mutual exchanges of knowledge and expertise, collaboration on technical and commercially viable solutions in relation to scam and spam. And once you have these conversations going on, and this can happen even without an agreement, it can happen informally between regulators. Once you have that going on, and if you have concrete deliverables and you wish to sign a formal agreement, that is also an option. So for example, in July this year, the IMDA, Infocom Media Development of Singapore, and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, MOU for enhanced cooperation to combat scam and spam communications. Yeah, so that is all that I have to say for my session. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis, for introducing your activity in Singapore. I took on some of the notes about the issue of the working with the telecom operators in Singapore. I think that would be one of the important tool to address the spam and scam issue. And then especially the last slide, you mentioned about international cooperation. You mentioned scammers and spammers do not respect geographical boundaries. I think that's the quite important messages for the web dialogue, how to enhance our regional cooperation through this APT web dialogue. Okay, let's have a Q&A, a question and answer at the later stage. Let's move on to next speaker, who is Mr. Kyung-sik Park. He is a general researcher of KISA of Republic of Korea. His professional background started from 2012, covering the internet security, industry planning, and spam policy teams in KISA, and he worked for Ministry of Foreign Affairs from 2018 to 2020 for their international security division. With this, I'd like to hand over the microphone to Mr. Park. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kyung-sik Park. I'm Deputy General Researcher of Spam Policy Team at KISA. And first of all, I'd like to appreciate Mr. Shin and Mr. Park and everybody in the APT Secretariat involved in the hosting of the 2022 APT Symposium. Also, thank you for giving me the privilege to make a presentation. So let's start the presentation. Today, I'm going to talk about what KISA do for reducing spam and how the COVID-19 effect to spam trends and what we need to reduce international spam. KISA was established in 2009 and has role for response to cyber attack, personal data protection, and promotion of digital security industry and digital-based support in civil sector. I belong to the Internet User Protection Division under the Personal Data Protection Group at our agency. KISA helps Korea communications commissions to develop spam policies and investigated reported spam and prevent telephone fraud. Based on the Act on Promotion of Information and Communications Network Utilization and Information Protection, Korea is strictly regulating the sending of spam. According to this act, spam is defined as random messaging systems sending unsolicited messages to large numbers of recipients for the purpose of commercial advertising. According to the level of violation, the punishment ranges from imprisonment of 1 year or below, a penalty of 10 million won or below, or a fine of 30 million won or below. It'll be about $10,000 of penalty and a fine of $30,000. I've selected a few keywords so that you will have a better understanding of spam. The keywords are random and messaging systems, commercial advertising, and unsolicited. First of all, spam is sent to the recipient against their will, causing them to receive unnecessary information and waste of time checking or deleting them or opting out. Furthermore, illegal spam is not restricted to marketing methods that are annoying or causing inconvenience. It leads to illegal services such as annoying or as illegal gambling and illegal loans that cause economic damages to the users. As such, it is functioning as the gateway to illegal acts and is becoming a social problem. In legal terms, the target for regulation for sending spam is defined as random, which means anyone. In the next slide, I'll introduce how KISA is responding to such spams. In KISA, there are 2 teams that respond to spam, and we have 3 major tasks. First, we develop policies to respond to spam. We establish, improve, and enact laws and regulations related to spam. And we share spam report data with related institutions to reinforce our capability for spam response. Second, we conduct a survey on incoming spam through mobile phones and emails on a yearly basis. The results are announced to the citizens and reflected in policies for responding to spam. On a half-yearly basis, we announce spam distribution status to the public to encourage voluntary efforts of telecommunication service providers, such as telecommunication service companies or internet portals for spam reduction, and to enhance the citizens' right to know. The target for this report is mobile phone and email spam. Detailed studies are made according to incoming routes, types of advertising, and incoming countries to understand the spam distribution status at a glance. Users that receive spam can report to KISA through homepage, webpage, the telephone, and easy report on mobile phone. KISA receives if the reported spam is a violation of the law and requests investigations to prosecutor's office or police and Korea Communications Commissions. After investigation are conducted by the relevant investigation agency, penalty or punishment will be imposed. This is the process of spam report investigation punishment system. Meanwhile, in order to respond to spam, we used 17 different systems, including mobile phone spam easy reporting system, real-time spam blocking system, and a spam trap system, and so on. That was the way how KISA responds to spam. Now I'll move on to the main subject. The first topic that I'd like to discuss is trends of spam in the COVID-19 pandemic environment. COVID-19 has had an influence in almost every sector throughout the globe. So I share with you how COVID-19 influenced spam in Korea. If you look at the table on the left, it shows the number of reports according to year and channel from 2018 to 2021. We made a comparison with the numbers of reports before and after the COVID-19. In 2018, which was before the breakout of COVID-19, the total number of spam reported was approximately 32 million. In 2019, it's about 5 million reports increased, and there was approximately 37 million reports of spam. This pattern continued during the proliferation of COVID-19 in 2020. Spam reports increased by 15% in 2020 compared to 2019 before COVID. Most of these increase was due to spam on mobile phones. We classify spam on mobile phones into voice spam and text spam for analysis. Before COVID-19, there were more voice spam reports compared to text spam reports. In 2020, the number of the text spam reports exceeded that of voice spam. The main trend for spam in COVID-19 pandemic environment would be the increase of spam through mobile phones and the decrease of spam through emails. The table on the right shows the increasing number of spam by year on mobile phones. Since 2018, the most frequently reported mobile phone spam was illegal loans. In 2020, the year of COVID-19 proliferation, reports for illegal mobile phone voice spam took up 69% of all spam reports. The number of reports increased by 15% compared to the previous year of 2019. Due to the proliferation of COVID, the Korean government enforced various policies for economic revival, such as emergency relief funds and reduced interest rates of loans. Spammers abused these circumstances to send illegal spam and caused secondary economic damage by voice phishing, smishing, or phishing, and other methods. So let's look at the types of mobile phone text spam. Most of the mobile text spams were related to illegal gambling, such as sports gambling, lotteries, or Powerball. However, after COVID-19, the portion of finance and illegal loan spam was growing. 2020 was a year of investment of Korea. The main keyword for 2020 in Korea was 영끌, which means put your heart and soul into investment. Other keywords were real estate and stocks. In short, spam through mobile phones increased in the COVID-19 pandemic environment. Text spam showed a particular big increase. First, KISA is sharing. Let's talk about the response status. First, KISA is sharing the data with institutions according to types of spams. To reduce spam for illegal loan, we are collaborating with banks and the finance supervisory services. The phone number was advertising used by the banking industry is regarded as a whitelist, while all other numbers are regarded as spam. Furthermore, we cooperate with the police and share spam reported data so that phone numbers used for voice phishing can be suspended from use. And to reduce spam related to stock, we share data with the Korea Exchange on spam data is suspected to control the market prices, and they are designated as stocks requiring caution, and so on. And finally, last year, we are establishing a project for preventing illegal spam that feigns banks and financial institutions to prevent exclusive telephone lines for sending spam. The subscription of illegal spam telephone lines are being restricted. Strong measures are being taken, such as suspending all numbers used by the spammers on the receipt of report. We found out that an increasing number of mobile phone spam is being sent from foreign countries. We are making various efforts to reduce spam that is produced and sent domestically. However, the foreign spam is another challenge that we face. I'll show the current situation in the following slide. The explanation of foreign spam, which means spam from abroad, will be focused on mobile text spam. In 2021, a total 1 million foreign spam were reported. Gambling had the highest proportion among the rapidly increasing types of foreign spam. The figures on the right are, there's a map on the right is a concise process of how a text sent from overseas reaches the recipient in Korea. There are many stakeholders in the process of domestic sending the text message up to reaching the final recipient. Therefore, it is not easy to find the initial sender. However, through the continuous investigations and information sharing, we can find the domestic spam initial sender and punish them. Meanwhile, if the message is sent from the overseas, it is almost impossible to find the initial sender. The text sending systems and regulations are different in each country, and due to the contract among operators, and information cannot be disclosed to each other. Therefore, the texts are filtered through faces and patterns in the receiver, but spammers find a way to detour the filtering. So there are limitations in blocking spam. The biggest problem is that spammers in Korea are sending spam messages in Korean by detouring such blocking and regulations. They use the overseas spam SMS or voice call sending systems. Let's take a look at the key examples of foreign spam underneath the slide. They have been translated into English for your reference, but were originally sent in Korean. The first case is that the spammers pretend to be a shopping platform and forge overseas payment. They try to trick the user into believing a transaction took place so that they would contact the number in the text. It is a typical case of smishing or phishing. Another example where they pretend to be your acquaintance, or they pretend there is a delivery to be made, as people often make direct overseas purchases these days. Spam sent from Korea are being blocked using various policies and measures. However, these foreign spams are difficult to block or prevent. I'm sorry. I don't think these issues are only limited to Korea. I'd like to ask everyone to think about whether foreign spam is becoming an issue in your country. As I mentioned before, spam from abroad can be blocked from the receiver. Local mobile carriers operate AI-based intelligent spam blocking system. KISA shares spam report data such as sender's number and spam phrases for enhancing those systems. Also, mobile phones have built-in functions for blocking spam and spam blocking apps of mobile carriers. In addition, we are promoting users to set international sender or foreign sender as spam phrases. It's like a labeling. However, this method is a minimum measure of blocking spam, but it does not prevent the sender from sending spam. It is not effective if spammers improve developing techniques or technologies to detour the blocking system, or if users don't block the spam actively. I think to block spam from abroad, the first method is to reinforce the efforts to respond to spam at each country level. As I am aware, definitions for spam are different, very different in every country. Therefore, the regulations are so different. Share the definition with other countries is a good starting point to respond to spam. Countries that have a spam reporting system should share the quantity of foreign spam and prepare laws and regulations for respond to foreign spam. The second method is to reinforce the self-regulations of telecommunication companies in each country. It is difficult to find the initial sender of foreign spam as the phone number system, telecommunication regulations, and industry structure is very different in each countries. I'm aware that the technical problem will not be solved in a short period of time, but I believe the time can be shortened by mutual agreements between private companies and institutional cooperation between countries. If the international communication contracts among text transmission companies or telephone operators include a clause regarding the responsibility for spam is if messages sent or received as regarded as illegal according to the laws in each other countries. The quality and the quantity of spam sent and received in overseas countries will be reduced due to the self-blocking and inspection. If you have any concerns and explanatory cases or ideas to share regarding responding to foreign spam, please feel free to continue discussion with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Park, Deputy General Researcher. My apology for that. He outlined some of the important points. For instance, foreign spams and then items for the collaboration. I think those are the issue for our further discussion. Thanks for that. And then he also provides some statistics about increasing number of voice spam over the mobile phone, whereas the spam email is decreasing. So I think this is quite informative information. Okay, let's move on to next panelist, who is Kathleen Ashura-Lee, who has over 20 years of experience in developing communication policy and regulation. Kat has primarily worked on matters related to consumer protection, related to telecommunication services, broadcasting costs or practice, and service delivery. She is currently Assistant Secretary of the Consumer Safeguard Branch with the Department of Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development, and Telecommunication, Australia. Kat, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for your very informative presentations and for this great honour invitation to this webinar. I think, Dr. Park, it was you who said that spam and scam are very much connected, and I would totally agree with you. So for my presentation, I wanted to take you across the whole spectrum that the journey that Australia's been on. And we start, if you go to slide 3, I think, I'm getting help with my slides, you can see. So my first section is about telemarketing and spam. So under Australian law, unsolicited marketing falls into 2 categories. The first was around voice calls, which was the first way that we all experienced unsolicited marketing, either by a direct call from somebody trying to sell you something, or from what we call robocalls, which were recorded voice messages or software to produce a voice. The next iteration became messages, which is emails, text messages, and instant messages using apps on mobile phones or computers. So how are these regulated in Australia? Like a number of the other examples, we have a Do Not Call Register Act, which was made in 2006. So telemarketing calls and marketing faxes, I know there are still faxes, cannot be made or sent to numbers which are listed on the register without the consent of the phone account holder. Consent can be expressed or inferred through if you have an ongoing commercial relationship with the sender. So the things regarded as telemarketing or marketing are things that offer or advertise goods, services, land, business, or investment opportunities, which I think is very similar to the experiences in Korea. There are some exemptions which can apply to certain public interest organisations, say, for example, medical researchers, government bodies, or charities. And there are industry standards which say when and how calls can be made, the time of the day. In Australia, there is a lot of concern that people were getting calls, marketing calls, just as they were sitting down to eat their evening meal. And that became the time when everyone, the marketers, knew you were at home, so they would call you at that time. So there's specific times of the day that those marketing calls can be made. As at the 30th of June, there were 12.4 million numbers registered. That's almost 6 million fixed line numbers and 6.15 mobile numbers, and still 411,000 fax numbers. Move to the next slide. Thank you. So how is spam regulated? There is a Spam Act, which was made in 2003, and it sets out that commercial electronic messages, that's text messages or emails, with an Australian link are prohibited without the consent of the account holder. Again, consent can be expressed very directly or inferred. A commercial electronic message is along the same lines as a telemarketing call. So something that's trying to sell you something, or offer you something. Commercial electronic messages that have been consented to must include an unsubscribe facility that works. They must identify the sender and contain the name and contact details of the entity that authorised the message. So they must be clearly marked. Like the Do Not Call Register Act, exemptions apply to certain public interest organisations, government bodies, charities. Factual messages, which are primarily around product recalls, or such as during COVID, information about vaccinations or various government orders around how the community should be living during COVID, were also exempt. In terms of compliance, I should point out that my organisation sets the policy and helps make the rules. The compliance is conducted by the Australian Communications and Media Authority, and you saw a picture of the chair of the ACMA in an earlier presentation from Singapore when she was, Ms. O'Loughlin was signing an MOU with Singapore. So the ACMA is the communications regulator, and they're responsible for administering both the Do Not Call and the Scam Act. They conduct regular investigations into suspected breaches of spam and telemarketing legislation, and they report on this compliance. It remains one of their highest level of priorities for 22-23, and there is often regular high-profile cases of when the ACMA has determined that a company, and it's usually a larger company, is in breach of one of those acts, and quite heavy penalties apply. Just in terms of consumer trends, Australians' experience of unsolicited communications is very negative. People have a very negative view. Nearly all Australians report that they have taken some form of action to manage unsolicited communications, and 97% of Australians have received an unsolicited phone call in the last 6 months prior to the survey. 82% of people were annoyed, while some, 33%, felt quite anxious or vulnerable or distressed. And that's particularly older people or people on their own or living in a very vulnerable situation. Just while I'll segue to scams, I think one of the most important weapons, and I think we've heard it in a couple of the presentations, one of the most important weapons we can have in a fight against scams and spam, I think, is instilling in our communities a very healthy dose of skepticism and suspicion. I think many times people are very trusting of messages that they've received and open things or click on links. And our most effective weapon is to get people to think at least twice before they click on a link that they weren't expecting to get. So I'll just move on to scams. And as I said at the outset, scams and spam, I think, are very closely related. Australians lost a record of more than 2 billion Australian dollars to scams in 2021. And much like Korea, investment scams were the highest loss category with $701 million. Followed by payment redirection. So that was like a similar type of scam that was experienced in Korea, and romance scams. Sadly, scams that prey on the lonely and the vulnerable people. Australians reported losing $142 million. I will mention that many people may feel embarrassed that they have lost money to a scam. So these figures are only the ones that are reported, and we actually suspect that the numbers would be much higher. Much of the Australian government's recent work in unsolicited communications has been directed at trying to reduce scams. One of the best weapons we've had so far in reducing scams was a code that was registered by the regulator, the ACMA. Under this code, telecommunications providers must publish information to help their customers proactively manage and report scam calls. They give them a very simple number, which as soon as they've got a scam call, they can just push the call through to that. They must trace reported scam calls, share information about those calls with other telcos so that it's not just one telco blocking. report those calls to the authority, like the ACMA, and block calls. Once they know that it's a scammer, those calls must be blocked. So more than 660 million scam calls were blocked between December 2020, when the code first came into operation, and June 2022. And that, again, that's probably a very low estimate. There's probably far more calls that were blocked, but they're the ones that are known about. A revised code was registered just in July of this year, and the revisions expanded the monitoring, tracing and blocking initiative of calls to texts. So not only do they have to publish information about calls, trace them, share information about them, etc., they have to do it for text messages as well. A further area of scamming in Australia that's become very prevalent is around people's mobile phone numbers being hijacked in order for scammers to steal their money. People's phone numbers are often linked in some way to their identification measures around their bank accounts, or all sorts of things are linked to your phone numbers. So scammers were hijacking mobile phone numbers in order to steal their accounts. So in April 2020, the ACMA made a standard mandating stronger identity verification processes, so that if you were trying to hijack someone's account, you would have to have at least 2 pieces of identity information to justify that port. This led to a 95% reduction in the reported scams of this type. But now, of course, scammers, being very smart, have moved to targeting telco accounts at other points. Example, rather than going for the phone number, they're looking at a practice called SIM swapping, which is for the same purpose of trying to gain access to the information that people use through their phone. To help in this process, the ACMA made a determination in April 2022, which requires an authorization process that provides a high level of assurance to prevent malicious actors from gaining access to a device and any sensitive information held on it. That's a relatively new April, but so far it seems that it is having very good results. Just to touch on the future, Australia has a new government since May of this year, and this government has had an election commitment to establish a national anti-scam centre to combat scams. What has happened in Australia is that there are many different agencies working on scams and combating them, either through banking, insurance, investments, telcos. So there's many different organisations, but the Scam Centre is one place to centralise, so that when a consumer experiences a scam, they know where to go. They can go to one place, and from there it will be managed by the appropriate agency. Our Competition and Consumer Commission is also undertaking a digital platforms inquiry, which is looking at what future scams work could be undertaken around online scams, such as fake websites, social media scams, and scams via over-the-top services. So thank you. Happy to have any questions later.
Thank you, Kat, for sharing your activities. I noticed that Australia has started to enact the Spam Act and the NCR Act back in 2003 and 2006, respectively. The survey you showed us conducted in 2021 showed that 97% of Australians experienced a spam call. That means that spam is a real persistent challenge for not only for Australia, but also throughout the world. So we all need to pay due attention, and somehow we need to work together. Thanks for that. And then we have listened the cases of Singapore, starting from Singapore, Korea, and Australia. And now I'd like to move on to another angle of the issue from Ms. Susan Park, who is a senior foreign attorney at Bay, Kim and Lee LCC. She is a member of IP practice group at BKR. As part of her practice, She routinely advised multinational clients on legal requirements relating to data privacy and protection, including spam and marketing messages. So we are expecting her from introducing some of the international cooperation perspective. Susan, over to you.
Right. Can you see my PPTs?
Yes, we can, but can you swap the screen? We are seeing the slide, not the presentation mode, but slide note mode. So yeah, that one, in the middle and the first one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. And thank you, Mr. Park, for the introduction. First of all, as with the other panelists, I would express my appreciation and a pleasure to be taking part on this webinar. And the benefit of being the last person on the panel is that all the important issues have already been covered by the panelists before me and the speaker. Because my area of practice is not in regulation or enforcement, but rather it's at the stage preceding enforcement or enforcement. So with that note, I'll present a very brief overview on the current state of the international cooperation in relation to spam or scam as a nice segue into the discussion for later today. So when it comes to international cooperation, spam messages have no national boundary, but its impact of damages can have ramifications in multiple jurisdictions. As illustrated by the other panelist and speaker from today, a spam message could result in, it could involve online fraud, phishing, dissemination of malicious viruses, and other consumer protection issues, and obviously data privacy issues as well. Combating spam involves both spam-specific and other areas of law. And as you've seen in the other presentations today, Singapore, Australia, and Korea, for example, each of those countries have spam-related regulations and laws. But because spam has no boundaries when it comes to enforcement, we need a systematic and cooperative enforcement framework for efficient regulation and enforcement at an international level. The most common form of international cooperation at the regulatory agencies level is in the form of multilateral or bilateral MOUs. And as presented by Francis and Kathleen, Australia, the governments of Australia and Singapore have recently entered into an MOU as early as, I believe, July of this year. So there are real efforts on the ground as we speak. International cooperation in relation to spam is, it's been going on for the over the past 2 decades, whether it was through symposiums or discussions organized by such organizations as ITU, EU Directive, or OECD anti-spam toolkits. And as mentioned by Mr. Shin, USENET, the Unsolicited Communications Enforcement Network, they do play a role in fostering international cooperation when it comes to unsolicited commercial messages. And some of the examples of multilateral and bilateral MOUs that are in place or have been in place, dating back to as early as 2003, Seoul, Melbourne, multilateral MOU. And by the time of 2015-16, we do have what was based on the famous London Action Plan. And stemming from that, we have an MOU among the public authorities of the Unsolicited Communications Enforcement Network pertaining to unlawful telecommunications and spam. It basically involves, it lays out the basic cooperation roadmap for the member regulatory authorities. And even for example, in the case of the US, it has the FTC, I believe, and FCC. So it could involve more than one regulatory agency from the same country, because spam, as you saw on today's presentation, involves different areas of law. The IT, IP, consumer protection, advertising, contracts law, data privacy. So obviously that involves cooperation at the different levels of regulatory authorities. Limitations of the current international cooperation measures, because at the end of the day, it's a cooperation, and it's based on the member states' willingness to cooperate, and based on the principles of reciprocity. So in order for such self-cooperation system to be in working, each member state has to be committed to the cooperation, obviously, and also there is cooperation required from the industry, whether it's by means of getting involved in the development of the technological solutions, or as Mr. Park from KISA mentioned, there are certain rules to be played by the telecommunications carriers or the ISPs. And at the industry-wide level, they can also share best practices to ensure efficient enforcement and prevention of unsolicited commercial messages. And at the users level, and probably they are probably the parties that are most affected by today's discussion, they need to be aware of their rights and the potential dangers posed by spams or scams, and they need to be proactive in fostering the evolution of the internet environment. I think, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I think this concludes the presentation, which summarized all the presentation of previous speakers. Especially you highlight some of the multilateral and bilateral agreement. At the same time, we encourage the industry and the user to work on the spam issue. So we all together need to act together. That would be the conclusion of your talks. Having said this, I don't know how much time we have for the Q&A session. But I think, Ashurya, do you want to say something before we proceed to the Q&A?
Yes, Dr. Park, can we have a group photo right now?
Okay, sure.
Yep. Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Once again, keep smiling. Okay, thank you, everyone.
But I cannot see the picture of my boss. By the way, I don't know how much time we have for the Q&A session, and then I haven't seen any question to the chat box. But if you have any question, feel free to raise your question.
I think there's one question for me in the Q&A box.
I cannot see. Could you please proceed?
Okay, so the question is, many calls are received in Singapore showing +65 number. Are there any regulation on operators to block such calls as they come from outside Singapore but show Singapore country code +65? Okay, so the short answer is yes, we are exploring such an option to block such calls, but maybe to clarify the context, right? There are legitimate calls with +65 coming from overseas. So two examples. One example is when a Singaporean with a local number travels overseas and calls back to Singapore. His number is a Singapore number, but because he is overseas, it will appear as +65. So that is a legitimate call. Another example is when local businesses use overseas call centers. The overseas call centers will legitimately spoof the local business's number, but because when it's coming overseas, when the call center calls a customer, for example, +65 will appear. But again, these are legitimate numbers. But the problem is that most of the +65 calls that come into Singapore are not legitimate, are scams. So the telcos are working on how to block scam calls using analytics, and I can't reveal more because I don't know how they are going to do that. They are very secretive about it in order not for scammers to game the system. So that is in the pipeline, and probably by the end of this year or early next year. So in Singapore, you would probably see a reduced scam calls from overseas using this +65 method. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis, for answering the question. I think we might have, let's say, actually we exceed the time, but I wish to take a little bit more to have some Q&A among ourselves. I'd like to make one common question to all of you. As we have heard, there are lots of issues for international cooperation. We have UCNet, and then RCEP agreement, and so on. And then we have a number of MOU between the two countries to address the common challenges. However, some of the countries, especially in the Asia-Pacific countries, who are not fully aware of the issue, and then who don't have much resources to address the spam. So in that sense, international organization like APT has some function to assist them. So I'd like to give you a floor one by one. If you have any suggestion for international community to assist not only developed countries, but also developing countries, how to address those challenges. Can I start from Francis?
Okay, sure. So my view is that maybe starting with an agreement might be too intense for some countries, and they might be reluctant to do that because if you want to sign an agreement, there are a lot of administrative details that need to be included. What are the deliverables, the timelines, and all that. But you don't need an agreement to start talking between regulators. So as shared in my presentation, I think we can start by having dialogue, conversations, even informal at the working level. That is enough. So you don't need the leaders of the regulators to talk. At the working level, you can start sharing information, tips, and also to collaborate. You can even, the regulators themselves could be the link to the industry as well, so that they can discuss commercial solutions to combating scam and spam. Yeah, so that is my input on this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Francis. Let's move on to Mr. Park from KISA.
In my view, if we hold a lot of these kind of webinars or web seminars, I'm sorry, it's the same thing, in APT or in other institutions, we can get more like participations to participate in another institutions. So let's make an example. If there's a another institution's participant in this webinar, we can show another relationship with like UCNet or ITU or other institutions. We can make a promotion, or no, I'm sorry, we can promote the other country's institution. So we can give another information to their to another, I'm sorry, another institution's participants. I'm in short, we should promote these kind of webinars a lot more in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Park. Yes, information exchange is always important. Okay, let's move on to Kat.
Thank you. Look, I totally agree with both of the two previous speakers. I think that it doesn't have to be formal. I think conversations are the start. And even, you know, people that are part of this webinar today, take down the names of other attendees, reach out, talk. Even when we got to a certain stage, we could have communities of practice where we just, you know, once every couple of months shared ideas and conversations about what was happening. Because I think we heard today many of the types of scams, particularly that are occurring, are very, very similar. And we could all learn practices from each other, but also how to talk to our communities about being more cautious, about what to look out for. And yeah, I agree. We don't have to start with formal agreements. We don't have to start with the technology, because that can be daunting. But we do have a conversation with our colleagues around the Asia Pacific region about what's happening in their country, how is it being experienced, and how other countries have dealt with that in large and small ways.
Yes, thank you so much, Kat. Yes, so while I'm listening, APT might compile those kind of information, like a handbook or those kind of documentation about the current practices and best practices. I think, and then share those information with our membership. That would be the one of the other way. Okay, let's move.
So just to follow up on that, I think if we do that though, to have a contact with each of those, it's because then you've got someone you can go and ask a question directly and say, how did you do this? Or how did you start doing that? So I think having a contact is very important.
Yes, that's a good information. Actually, when I listened to the speeches today, regarding the computer emergency response issue, we have CERT organization to address the issue. And then we have a designated focal point for each organization. Once there is any emergency issue, they have communicated each other to share the information. But when it comes to spam and scam, I think there is no such kind of information available. I think that would be one of the good suggestions. Thank you, Kat. Susan?
Yes, so I generally agree with the ideas shared by the other panelists and speaker. And, you know, I agree that at the most basic level, international cooperation when it comes to spam or scam is, you know, sharing of information. And when it comes to enforcement and regulation, that's the sharing of information for purposes of investigation and enforcement. But at the user level, and we're talking about informal ways of furthering internal cooperation, the sharing of information, designating a contact, and Mr. Park, you mentioned that designating a point of contact and designating an organization that can disseminate helpful information to prevent, you know, unsuspecting users from falling prey to scam. That will be important.
Thank you so much. Mr. Sen, it's not the question, but I want to hear more from you about APT's activity in assisting developing countries in the spam. You mentioned about training courses and expert mission. So can you elaborate more on those?
Thank you, Jong-dong. Actually, we have tools like, as you said, the expert mission and training courses. So that is our basic capacity building activities. So in case of training course, we normally KISA and APT Secretariat collaborate with each other and to develop the training courses and program and provide it to APT members. Maybe we can provide it in 2023. And in case of expert mission, we provide consulting service to our developing member countries. And if there is a request, the member countries, we organize, we invite some experts in case of these STEM issues, like some experts from KISA can join the expert mission project, and we can provide consultancy to our members to help them to develop any kind of regulation or registration or policy regarding STEM. Also, I think information sharing is the most important thing in terms of STEM, responding STEM, as all the participants focuses. So I think it's very important to develop some kind of organized information, like best practices or solutions, how to respond technically to reduce the STEM spreading to the residents. So the kind of information gathering and sharing can be a very good solution to improve the response measures against STEM. So I think when we conduct our research, we can gather more information on the kind of that sort of information, and we can spread it by sharing our research reports and other sources with our members. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Sin. That's exactly what I want to suggest. During our discussion, information sharing is one of the key elements for addressing this challenge. So while you conduct the study, we might collect information from our member administrations about focal point and some other information, not only the legislation or policy, and then throughout all APT member administration, 38 member administration, that would be helpful for to address these challenges. I have seen some of the questions, but I'd like to briefly mention the presentation slide will be available APT website, APT web dialogue for you to download. And then this APT symposium is open not only for member administration, but also all APT stakeholders. Sometimes we invite not non-APT members, so it's open platform for everyone. And then APT try to address, reach out not only our members but also some other minorities in our citizens, in our members. So we try to work together with our member administration how to address those issues. And then APT has a number of assistance program for that. I'm sorry, we have been delayed a little bit, but I do hope our discussion is quite informative and useful for all the panelists and then all the participants today. And then my understanding of spam and scam is similar to climate change. There is no boundaries. And then some countries in our region, they don't have factories in that country, but they are suffering from the climate change. I think spam and scam is also the similar situation. Although they don't have any spam they are not the spam or scam initiator, they are the victim. So in that sense, all the stakeholders, member administrations, telecom operators, and users, we all need to work together. And that's what I want to conclude today's talks. With that conclusion, I'd like to hand over the microphone to our MC, Surya.
Thank you, Dr. Park, and thank you, everyone. Now we've come to the end of this web dialogue, and I would like to express our sincere appreciation to our speakers today for sharing their knowledge. And also thank you to all our attendees. Please provide your feedback through the survey link shared in the chat box. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us today, and see you at our next web dialogue. Thank you and bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your
Thanks,
active
everyone.
participation.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.